I love telling people about this. I met the bassist Buster Williams, and he was very kind, really friendly, and he can be a very calm, peaceful kind of dude. That's the way he struck me. And I was in awe of the guy. I was like, but I remember at the end of our conversation, he said, welcome to New York. Nice to meet you. And good luck finding your niche.
Hey, folks, welcome to episode 55 of the Bass Shed Podcast. My name is Ryan Roberts. On the episode is Todd Coolman. Todd Coolman is a veteran on the New York jazz scene. Todd has worked with the who's who of jazz musicians. He's worked with Horace Silver, Gerry Mulligan, Art Farmer, Lionel Hampton, Benny Goodman, Slide Hampton, Stan Getz, Tommy Flanagan. He spent over 20 years working with James Moody. That is a very impressive resume. Todd Coolman has also authored 2 books, The Bass Tradition and The Bottom Line. He has released 4 albums as a leader, and he is the host of a bass podcast called The Cool Toddcast. I highly recommend it. The podcast is really fun. I like Todd's podcast. It's a really behind the curtain look at his time in New York, and speaking with other great musicians that he's worked with, and also answering questions. That's something that he's really interested in, is to give back to people that reach out to him and ask him questions about, his thoughts and feelings and ideas and concepts, or talk more about his approach to being a jazz bass professional in New York. I will have links up to all of that, Todd's podcast, his books, and his albums at thebassshed.com/podcast/Todd Coolman. Double bassists, everything you need for the double bass can be found at lemurmusic.com. Parts, classical etude books, repertoire, practice resources, amps, preamps, cabling, the whole bit. Everything you need for the double bass can be found lemurmusic.com. Everything you need for the double bass. Trickfish amps. Trickfish amps. Go to www.trickfishamps. You can use the promo code TheBassShed to get 10% off. I love what they're doing over at Trickfish. So if you're a working double bassist, definitely doubling bassist. Double bassist and electric guy, or girl, person, whatever. If you're doubling on gigs, you're going to want to check out the Trilobite. If you are not doubling on gigs and you are either just a double bassist or an electric bassist, the Minnow is what you're going to want to check out. They also have an assortment of cabinets and heads. Trickfishamps.com. Use the promo code TheBassShed for 10% off. www.dlakenbasses.com. Dan Laken, founder of Lakeland Basses, has a new company, D. Laken Basses. Stop by, check him out. Dan is also doing some amp distribution. You'll want to check out the brands he's working with. I've checked out all those amp companies and agree with his decisions on amp companies to work with. So you're going to want to check that out. Go to www.dlakenbasses to learn more. All right, as I mentioned, jazz veteran New York bassist Todd Coolman is on the podcast, and it was a great time to connect with him. I had been a fan of his for years, and he wrote a book called The Bass Tradition, which was had a huge impact on me. And obviously, what I'm doing with the Bass Shed, with transcriptions and talking about the bass tradition and history and culture, it was all something Todd had already done in the book The Bass Tradition. If you have not checked out that book, I highly recommend it. Had a big impact on me, and I've been aware of Todd for quite some time. It was great to connect with him. We talk a lot about gig preparation, some attributes that have contributed to his value on the New York jazz scene. We discuss his podcast. We discuss the books he's written. You're being dropped into the conversation. The conversation was already going, and we had spent a little bit of time up front just talking about COVID. And how he had been impacted by COVID, during the lockdown over there in New York. And, we discussed some silver linings to it, where you just time to slow down, kind of get out of the hustle a little bit, enjoy some life around you that normally will just pass you right by, to reconnect with some musicians that you don't see that often because they're on the road or everybody just has busy schedules. So that's what we had discussed. And now you're being dropped into the conversation where we're kind of finishing up the talk about COVID and moving forward. But that's where it is. And this is my talk with bassist Todd Coolman.
I honestly, I feel a little bit out of shape.
Yeah.
Because, I wasn't aware of it so much, but, especially when I was working several nights a week, on the days when I worked at night, I had kind of a routine.
Okay.
The way I set my day up and get this together and get that, all leading to try to optimize my performance.
Sure.
And it seemed to happen in a certain order, and I've even forgotten the routine. You know what I mean?
Is that something that just kind of evolved into a ritualistic practice, or something you mentally said, okay, it was strategized?
Yeah, no, it evolved.
Okay.
Just through experience.
Yeah.
And, I guess I sort of lucked up on a sort of, like you say, a ritual that seemed to lead to success.
Okay.
So whether it was to make sure that I took a nap in the mid-afternoon, 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Or that I reserved some time in the morning to go over the music that I'd be playing that evening, to review things. Whatever, whether it meant, okay, I have to leave the house at a certain time.
Sure.
So 40 minutes before that is when I start getting my gear together.
Right.
Loading the car a certain way to make sure that I have everything I need.
Yeah, everybody's got their own little Jenga game to get the car together.
It's the result of having messed up so much.
Yeah.
Right? And then you just say, well, I remember one gig, this is hilarious, was really hot summer, like August, and super humid. And driving around New York is kind of funny. Well, I'm not telling you anything driving around LA, but
we don't deal with the humidity you guys have. There's at least
for sure. Yeah, that's for sure. But you know what it's like. I'm sure it's the same in LA. It's like if you leave a whole bunch of extra time and like you say, okay, I'm going to leave at least an hour before I have to, then there seems like there's no traffic. You get there. And,
I know.
But if you're like cutting it close, it's like the worst day of your life.
Yeah, and you're probably going to be 10 minutes late.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was one of those days where I had cut it kind of close. I guess I got lost track of the time. So I get in this panic mode, but leave the house pretty much just in time to get there, maybe 15 minutes early.
Okay. Is
so
this
I'm driving
like for perspective, is this before a sound check or is this before downbeat?
Before downbeat.
Okay.
Yeah. So
that's coming in hot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm just racing, on the expressway and pardon me, freeway. And and I'm looking for cops and I'm all that. And I'm about 15 minutes into my drive and I'm looking in the rear view mirror to make sure, and something caught my eye and I look, my bass is not in the car.
Oh, man.
Can you believe this? I don't have my instrument. I think this is unbelievable. So I turn around.
Yeah,
I race home. I get my bass, get back in the car, and it's just like Indy 500.
Sure.
Right? Somehow or another, I get to the job, and I basically hustle in with my instrument. I swear it's got to be like 3 minutes before downbeat. The guys are already like maneuvering on the bandstand and all this. And I just get up there. I'm just covered with like sweat, just like the whole, and I'm just completely wired and just shot.
Yeah, just running on nothing but anxiety.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So throw the cover off my, And I literally, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I play, I get to the first note.
Yeah.
But I play the whole night in absolute misery.
Yeah.
And
a lot of tension, in your body, and you can't focus, and you're rattled.
No,
and
I couldn't get out of it. It was a gear that I couldn't get out of, and it really affected my performance. Fortunately, one of the things, of course, that we work on is consistency, right? Mm-hmm. So hopefully, even on your worst night, you'll at least be at a quasi acceptable level. Maybe not like contributing in a big way, but no landmines. You know?
Yeah.
And also, when you're consistent, people that you work with that know you and know you to be consistent, you've built up like what I call currency with them.
Yeah.
So that they know this is not like you. This is not your habit.
Right.
And plus, they've all been there, right?
Yeah. So
the minute that I rushed into the club, everybody knew what was up. Right. I didn't have to explain anything.
Yeah.
So you get through it, but that experience leads to creating these rituals.
Yeah.
And so getting back to that, it's just like, and also there's just like for me, there's a rhythm to the day. And when I get that right, I really feel optimized at downbeat. I feel like I'm at peak level to at least do my best. It's not like I'm going to change music history tonight, but at least I'm giving myself the best chance to perform well, and therefore giving my bandmates the best chance to be comfortable performing their best.
Yeah. I think so much of that is, at least for me, is really about keeping the day relaxed, and like the process to get to the gig, keeping that relaxed so I could show up, set up relaxed, maybe whatever, walk to a coffee spot, get a cup of coffee.
Absolutely.
Everything way overly relaxed so that by the time we're playing, the playing's relaxed.
You and I need to go to a gig together because we probably do the exact same thing, Yeah. and one thing that George Duvivier, rest his soul, I observed in him once, he always had a paperback book in his bass case.
Mm.
So he'd get to work super early.
Yeah.
And he'd get his coffee and sit down and read and just be like cool.
Yeah.
And then when it was time to hit, he was like in that really kind of almost like a mindless zone, right?
Yeah.
So then that's beautiful because there's whatever traffic he endured.
Right.
That's over.
Right.
Whatever aggravation, whatever,
Yeah.
And he had been in the club. His bass is already set up. It's already tuned. He's ready for work.
Yeah. That seems like such a kind of old school mentality. Like young guys are just like, all right, the gigs was 7 to 10. So I'm going to come in 6:45. Boom. My stuff's up. Let's go. I'm out at 10. And they're just running it really hard, tight, and not just letting it kind of breathe and prepare themselves and their mind space.
I might have been a little bit like that when I was younger, I suppose. But it's the unfortunate thing about that is that you never know how the people that hire you are going to react to that.
Yes, exactly.
So some people, for them, perhaps for some of their peers, maybe that modality is acceptable,
Yeah.
So, of course, that just reinforces that behavior.
Right.
But then if, for example, they get the call from Pat Metheny.
Yeah.
Or Peter Erskine. Or,
right.
That ain't going to cut it.
No.
And then a lot of times they're shocked that there's actually this idea that you have to be ready.
Yeah.
And being on time is being late for some of us.
Yeah.
So, I'd rather just be on the safe side.
Sure.
I'm oftentimes the first guy there. But you know something? I realized this years ago, and I would offer this as maybe some advice. to some of our younger bassists. Living in the New York area, and you're in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
There's a valid question that came to my mind, which is, why would anybody hire me? You look, man, Ron Carter lives here. Dave Holland is here. John Patitucci, Christian McBride.
What's funny is the first time I talked to Patitucci on the phone, he said he brought up the same exact thing before he moved from LA to New York. And he told me that Brecker was trying to get him to move to New York. And his first response was, why? Ron Carter's there.
Well,
look, I think it's a valid question that everybody thinks about. Yeah,
it is. And yet, so I figured early on, I thought, okay, first of all, I don't consider myself a natural musician. I don't come from like a musical family necessarily. And, I'm kind of a hard worker and a good student, Yeah. So, but I thought, okay, well, if I want people to hire me, what can I offer that I would consider value added?
Okay.
So there's certain elements of what I've worked to create to kind of educate people as to basically looking at myself as a commodity, like, what do you get when you take a package of Todd Coolman off the shelf?
Yeah.
Right. So the guy's more than on time.
Mm-hmm.
Always prepared to play your music.
Yeah.
Like he's really checked it out. I try to be nice. In my case,
the emphasis on try.
Yeah, it's a great effort on my part. Yeah. But I try not to bring my problems to the gig.
Uh-huh.
Everybody's got problems. I try to serve the band leader's interests. Mm-hmm. He's the person that hired me, or she.
Sure.
And I try to make the job as easy as I can for my colleagues.
Now,
because,
a couple. No, I mean, all those do add value to the overall experience for what you're bringing, and it represents yourself as a strong professional, and I think honors the other people in the band that have also taken the time out of their lives to contribute to this music that you're creating together. To talk about the leaving your problems at home, how do you feel about that in relation to still playing from this place that is very much emotionally present?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the problems that are personal.
Mm-hmm.
Say I had an argument with my wife. Okay,
sure,
something of that nature. That doesn't really enter the picture, musically speaking. There are other problems, I suppose, that our music speaks to.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really part of the message that we're trying to convey.
Yeah.
When we play music. So those are, in my view, are much larger problems.
Okay.
And I learned being on the road taught me a lot about like social interaction and stuff, because look, I mean, we all are quirky.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have our things.
Yeah. We all have our own little batch of crazy.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you're on the road with a bunch of crazy dudes, right?
Yeah.
And you're one of them.
Right. And
so you got the guy who every time you stop somewhere for a meal, he's got his own way of addition that somehow he's not covering, he's somehow blissfully forgetting about tax and tip or something.
Yeah.
And that's his thing.
Yeah.
All right. So then you got another guy who is always complaining about like he didn't get the seat that he reserved on the plane or something.
Sure.
And then you got Coolman with his shtick, right? So, but I learned by observing, I thought, everybody's got these little ticks, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it occurred to me that the guys I was traveling with were putting up with my nonsense.
Mm.
They were choosing to live with it, kind of overlook it, as long as it didn't get to be too invasive
or
disruptive.
Okay.
Okay, so Coolman, he's impatient about when it's time to leave the gig. He's ready to go, and he doesn't want people to socialize.
Yeah.
Or that's his thing.
Is that a thing? You just like to, you don't like to
not talk. The hanger guy. Yeah. So, but man, I figured, look, these guys are putting up with a lot out of me, just all this nitpicky crap that I get involved with.
Yeah.
And I thought, then the least I can do is like tolerate theirs.
Sure.
And the bottom line is it's usually not so bad anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if a guy's going to be overtly disruptive, right? Unless it's the band leader, he's probably not going to last very long anyway.
Right. He'll weed himself out of the
pretty
situation.
Much. Yeah. It's like self-censoring. They just, they're maybe it's because they're unhappy in that situation.
Sure. Yeah.
And if they are, they have their own reasons for not quitting.
Right.
But a band leader who detects that can easily say, look, you'd be happier if you weren't here.
Right. And
I'm letting you go for your own benefit.
Right. And just lift the morale of the group, then when that kind of energy is out, then everybody's a little lighter.
Well,
and it changes the whole dynamic.
I've noticed when, I've traveled with big bands, for example, and Jerry Dodgen used to keep a little notebook, and I asked him, what are you doing with? He says, I'm just fascinated by people. He says, it's one of the greatest things about being on a big band is just observing all these different guys with all of these different agendas. He says, I find it utterly fascinating.
Sure.
So, but oftentimes on a big band, you'll find maybe one guy who's kind of the malcontent.
Yeah.
He's the guy that's always like bitching about the one thing or the other. And what's interesting is they'll come up to you or others like complaining or something. And what they're actually trying to do is recruit you.
Yeah.
Like, I want you to share my misery, and then I want you to take over so that if anybody gets in trouble, it'll be you and not me.
Yeah, they're passing the baton.
Exactly, and so there's all kinds of scenes, but I've even noticed in a case like I just described, if it gets too weird, then you notice on the next tour the guy's not there.
Yeah.
So supply and demand certainly works against the malcontent.
Yeah, I think my little 2 cents on that is specifically in LA, and I'm sure the New York area is very similar and the same, is whatever instrument the guy is playing that is kind of the the landmine, so to speak.
Right.
Everybody has 20 guys that can do the job in their phone. Like, dude, you are completely disposable. And like, I try to think that about myself. Like, I know that I'm disposable on any gig. It's Los Angeles. Everybody's looking for work. They can call whoever to get this job done. So I have to always just bring the A game.
I totally agree. I totally agree with you. And I live by this motto. Years ago, there was a commercial for a company called BASF. I don't even know what that stands for. But their motto was so cool. They said, we don't make anything. We just make things better.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I think, that's the feeling I want to leave with people who hire me, is that like, we played all these gigs this year with all these different personnel and all this, whatever. But I noticed that when Coolman was there, things generally seemed to go better. I wasn't responsible for that directly, but they start making these associations.
Right.
They have good gigs, great gigs, medium gigs, awful gigs all year long. But every time they had a really great gig, it seemed like Coolman was there.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean anything about I'm God's gift to the bass. It has nothing to do with that. It has more to do, in my mind, with preparation and some sense of civility, or that we're in it together.
Yeah.
And if you can bring that consistently, it seems to me, in my experience, people respond well to that. And there are people who call me to work with them to this day who have called me for 30 and 40 years.
Yeah.
So another little tidbit for the youngsters. Where will you be when you're Coolman's age?
Yeah.
Like, do you have longevity in your game plan? So that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah, that's definitely something to always be considering. And it's something now, given how technology has impacted the music world and the music business, and everybody almost every year you have to figure out what the new thing is and how to navigate that. That being said, we're both doing podcasts now. So that's something that we're learning to navigate through this. And there's always something, and I think with longevity, the days may be over where someone could just make a healthy living playing, or sustainable living just playing.
There's a very good argument, to support that theory for sure.
Yeah.
And so we find ourselves, you and I, and maybe others, wearing a wider variety of hats.
Sure.
But fortunately, the things that I've branched out to, shall we say, have all been enjoyable.
Yeah.
So lucky me, and it's all, I used to use the analogy for students. You take 2 hardware stores in your town. One of them has 2 aisles in which they sell, on one aisle, nails.
Yeah.
And the other aisle, hammers. And then you go to the next place and they've got wrenches, screwdrivers, saws, blah, blah, blah. Where are you going to shop,
Yeah.
So, and of course the landscape is constantly changing. The music's always evolving and, going through various changes. So, I try to be aware of various avenues that I feel that I have a skill set for. When I first moved to New York, I love telling people about this. I met the bassist Buster Williams.
Okay. And
he was very kind, really friendly, and he can be a very calm, peaceful kind of dude. That's the way he struck me.
Okay.
And I was in awe of the guy.
Yeah.
I was like, but I remember at the end of our conversation, he said, welcome to New York. Nice to meet you. And good luck finding your niche.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
At all. I remember driving home thinking, what did he mean by that? Like, what? Good luck finding your niche. Your niche. What's my niche? What's he mean by that? I didn't come here to look for a niche.
Yeah.
But basically, I think what he was saying was, 1, evaluate your skill set and see what that avails you access to. 2, if your skill set isn't broad enough in the areas that you would like to be involved in, then you have work to do.
Yeah.
Right? Let's say, well, I want to play with Benny Golson. That's like my goal.
Yeah.
Well, you got to look at your skill set.
Yeah.
And the way you do that, or at least the way I did it, was I was out every night that I wasn't working, listening to people and imagining, okay, I'd like to work with that guy. So what is that bass player doing that enables him to be that person on that job? And what are those elements that he brings or she brings to this situation? And where am I deficient in those areas?
Okay.
It could be anything.
Sure.
It could be, this guy has a gorgeous sound, or he plays really well in tune.
Yeah.
Or his time feel is just fabulous, or he knows a million tunes.
Sure.
They played 8 tunes on this set and I didn't know 3 of them.
Yeah.
Well, you can bet that I had a little 39-cent spiral bound notebook, writing down the names of the tunes and going, and all that. So I just referred to that as field research.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like I was thinking about it. Oh, I'm going to take that guy's gig from him, because I can't do that anyway. But I just thought, in the event that I luck out and the phone rings and it's Benny Golson and he wants me to play with him, I'll be in that modality. I'll be able to demonstrate some level of an awareness of his musical world.
Sure.
And I remember the first time I played with Benny, and like it was yesterday, he had revived the jazz tet for a while in the 80s and 90s. And the way it worked was he liked to keep like 2 or 3 of each rhythm section player in the mix, because we were all freelancing, and one bass player, he wasn't working enough with the jazz tet to like have one bass player.
Right.
Like he always knew he would be there, Art Farmer would be there, and Curtis Fuller would be there. So that was the core. And then the rhythm section was either this guy, that guy, or that guy.
Right.
People who were familiar with the book. So he called me when guy number 1 and guy number 2 were not available. I think it was Ray Drummond.
Okay.
And Rufus Reed. It might have been, and one of those guys might have recommended me,
Sure.
Because both of those guys were very kind to me over the years, for sure.
Nice.
So anyway, it's at a place that I think it was in Buffalo, New York. I want to say it was called the Trafalgar or Trafalmador or something like that. And the weather was horrendous. It was in the winter. And Buffalo, man, is just like,
as I assume it to be. My mom's from Buffalo, so
you don't want to be there. You just don't want to be there, it's not happening in the winter. All right. So anyway, I managed to get up there, and all of the other guys were flying in from other destinations. I drove up, as I recall. So, it was real helter skelter, and guys were getting there like late, and it was all messed up, and so we played. I'm pretty sure I had called Rufus Reed a couple weeks prior, and I asked him if he had the book for the band, because Benny had arrangements and stuff.
Okay.
And so he asked Benny, I think, for permission, right?
Yeah.
To trust me with the book.
Okay.
So I got it, and you just practiced the living daylights out of those arrangements.
Sure.
So at the end of the night, Benny comes over to me. He says, "Boy, what a day. Billy Hart came in from, Newport, Rhode Island, and some other guy came in from here. And, it was just like total chaos." And he said, he says, we were all just so, I don't know what the term he used, like riled up or,
Yeah, kind of manic.
You were the only guy that sounded like he knew what he was doing tonight. and that really, I just thought, you got to prepare.
Yeah.
Because you don't know the situation you're walking into either.
Sure.
So, but that preparation you had mentioned earlier, I loved it when you said something about, like, you show up early to a gig to basically honor and to respect your colleagues.
Yeah.
They have their problems too.
Sure.
You're not going to add to it by being late. That's all there is to it.
Yeah.
So what I believe I was able to show Benny that night was, for sure, Todd is not God's gift to the bass. But number 2, he cared enough to really be ready and investigate and do his homework.
Yeah.
So there's a guy I'd like to add to my roster.
Yeah.
And you know something, man? I wound up working with that band for 3 or 4 years, I think.
Okay.
And as Ray and Rufus got busier and busier, I sort of became the guy.
Okay.
And then there were other guys coming up to add to the roster, like that.
Sure.
And so, like, I'm sure that's not the only band that was functioning in that way.
Sure.
So you became part of a stable of bass players.
Yeah.
That the band leader could reach out to without having to worry.
Right.
Not having to retrain anybody.
Right.
Like and I always try, I've shared this with lots of students. Being the bass player in the group for me and being a freelancer on top of that is really just like being the sixth man on the basketball team. They even have an award in the NBA for the most valuable sixth man.
Right.
All right. So what is his job? His job is to be in a perpetual state of readiness.
Yeah.
So although he's sitting on the bench, he's watching the game as if he's in it.
Yeah.
And he's analyzing every aspect of the game so that when his number is called, maybe to give LeBron James a 2-minute rest.
Yeah.
This guy goes out there and he immediately is in the flow. He knows the offense. He knows the defense. He knows who he's guarding. He knows who's been hot. He knows who's been cold. He's in there like totally ready.
Yeah.
And the game flows.
Right.
And then he's taken out in 2 minutes and LeBron's back in.
Yeah.
And he sits on the bench and watches just as intensely.
Sure.
And when his next call comes, he's in there.
Yeah.
And that's how I like when I play with anybody. I'm the biggest pain in the ass because I tell them, what are you playing?
Yeah.
Do you have originals? Are there any charts I could look at? Could you send me some YouTube links?
Sure.
Whatever.
Yeah.
I'm all over it.
Yeah.
And I'm just because why? I'm not God's gift to the bass. I'm not naturally musical. I have to work.
Sure.
And I have to prepare.
But I think that's the gift. I think some people have whatever disposition that they are just kind of musical geniuses, and then they spend it's there. It's just there at a super young age or whatever. But then there's other gifts, I think, of that, of recognizing the working world aspects of it and the social aspects and the professional aspects. And really, that's the dedication, because most gigs do not require God's gift to the bass. Most gigs do not require that at all. No one besides Victor Wooten is going to be called to be Victor Wooten. You don't have to do these virtuosic super things. They want someone there who they can play off of so they can do their thing. We're bass players. They want someone to stand on top of.
Right.
And foundationally speaking, you have to be solid with your mood, you're showing up on time, your sound, your time feel, all that stuff. But that's all part of the foundation for them to stand on as artists and frontmen, I think.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And, I've been fortunate. I can say that I know a lot of musicians in our business, but the ones that you described as they just have it and all that. Yeah. Probably less than 5% of the guys that I know have it. Yeah. Most of them are fit the description you just offered. Sure. So really it's, I think there are similarities in almost any profession. Yeah, going back to basketball, I mean, there's LeBron, and there's Jordan and there's Kobe, but there's really like the real working basketball players, Jeff Hornacek, Dan Marley, these older guys that were just kind of like utilitarian guys that are still on the court. They're still in the game with the legends. Maybe they won't be Hall of Famers, but they're doing it. And they're grinding it out. Yeah, but those guys were also at one time part of a championship team. Absolutely. So check that out. Yeah. And when there's no I in team, is there? Right. So you know what I mean? So like they have something. Yeah. And they're not LeBron or Jordan or Kobe. They're not that. Yeah. And the guys we mentioned, how many guys are in the NBA? I don't know, like 1,000, say. Yeah. We can name 10 of the Bird, Magic, Sure. And that's it, baby.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You know, they're like the Victor Wootens.
Right. Exactly.
And they're the Tom Harrells and the,
Yeah.
you know, and the Michael Breckers
Right.
and the John Patitucci's, you know, and those guys.
Yeah.
You know, those are the guys. But
Yeah.
I mean, come on already, you know? So really, you know, it's so funny. When I came to New York, I was 24 years of age. I had no game plan at all.
Where'd you come from? Where was home?
Well, more or less Chicago.
Okay.
So, and I had a great training ground there because at the time when I was sort of breaking in, there was just tons of work in Chicago.
Yeah.
And a shortage of good bass players.
Okay.
So supply and demand really worked in my favor.
Yeah.
So I got a lot of really great experience prior to coming to New York. But I had no plan when I came here at all. And actually, when I decided to go into music as a profession, the only goal I had was, I would prefer, I want to play music for a living. I prefer not to work in an office or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I would prefer to make a living that, somewhat better than like living on Skid Row.
Yeah. Okay.
And like,
so the
like
bar
maybe
wasn't
not
set unreasonably high.
Yeah, maybe not eating like SpaghettiOs out of the can like
every
4
night.
nights a week.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah.
Like once in a while, maybe having But I mean, really, seriously, that's where it was at. But when you're that age, your tolerance level for those adjustments is very high.
Yeah.
So the idea of living in an apartment with 9 other guys in a 3-bedroom apartment, it's like not that strange, really.
Yeah.
It gets strange as you get older.
Right. Yeah.
But
when you're 45 and doing it, then it's a thing.
Yeah, that's kind of it's a little deep then. But I think but hopefully if your career progresses, then it's like part of the career. It's part of this path. So, that's really why I just thought, I just thought I have to really work and really do my research and really, again, I love that word because it served me well. Preparation. It's that to me, it's 90% of the game, So, and especially now because, now there aren't, at least in New York, there aren't the plethora of working bands that there was when I moved here. Like when I moved here, people would say, "Who are you with?"
Right.
Oh, I'm with Gerry Mulligan, or I'm with, and you'd be with these guys for a year or two.
That's actually something I'm interested in to speak with you about because I don't know, and I'm sure you could qualify a time period in which maybe that shift happened, that it turned into like, let's say an artist putting together, they do a record. And so then maybe they do a bunch of dates with the band that was on the record. But then, okay, that's not the guys anymore for the next record. It's not like, Miles's quintet or Coltrane's quartet, where it was like a band unit that cultivated a specific sound over years of grinding it out together. When do you think, from your time in New York, from 78 to now, when do you think that you noticed more of that? You showed up and it wasn't like that already.
Right. It's hard to put the exact date on it, but I will say this. It feels like somewhere in the late 80s, early 90s, it feels like it was there somewhere. But so what caused it? One thing was a perception of like economics.
Okay.
But I remember that one club in particular, which I won't mention, but they initiated a policy of they would hire an individual and make him or her the band leader, but they would hire the sidemen.
All kind of superstar sidemen
or whatever, but generally people that they felt they could quote sell.
Sure.
So if I put together this dream band of these 4 or 5 individuals, my club will be full.
Yeah.
And to some extent, they were right. But a lot of times, the musicians they put together in their little dream heads were totally incompatible.
Mm-hmm.
And it made for some really horrendous music at times.
Sure.
But they had the names and people were in the club and the club owners were making money. So, like, who gives a damn?
Right. All the drummers are going to go, maybe check out Bill Stewart. All the bass players are going to go check out Ron Carter. And then there's going to be
exactly. Yeah. And it wouldn't matter if the people up there were, Mel Tillis or whomever. So that was part of what I call a certain erosion of that period. And then the record companies started getting hip to it.
Yeah. Doing the supergroups thing.
Yeah. And I and some band leaders basically would just kind of do whatever the record company dictated or whatever the producer wanted.
Yeah.
They just kind of didn't resist.
Sure.
Because it was for whatever set of reasons. Others would say, well, no, I have a band and this is my band and my name, like John Coltrane or whoever.
Yeah.
My name's big enough to sell your records. Like, don't worry about it.
Right.
And they may or may not win that battle. And then sometimes those records were never made because the leader said, well, this is my band. And the record company said, well, sorry, that's not who we want. And then the band would say, fine, get who you want. Because it's, obviously not me,
yeah.
But those guys were in the minority.
Mm-hmm.
And so as the record business was changing, of course, with the advent of the CD, I'll never forget this. The first guy that I ever talked to that really understood what the CD meant to the industry. Because I didn't even, CD, what is that?
Yeah.
Content, what is that? Piece of plastic? What is digital?
Yeah.
Well, like, what is that? So we were all like in a fog. But I remember Ron Carter told me, he said, this CD thing, he says, we've been making vinyl LPs for years.
Yeah.
About 42 minutes per side. Okay. So, and we've been making these records in 2-3 hour sessions. And getting 6 or 8 tunes recorded in that span of time. He said, this CD thing, they're going to want more music in the same amount of time.
Right.
And they're going to want to pay the same.
Yeah.
So instead of getting, 42 minutes, I didn't mean a side. I meant like the whole LP.
Yeah.
Or something. Now they want 70 minutes.
Right.
They don't want to pay for extra studio time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still a 6-hour thing. We have to really crank this stuff out.
Yeah.
And we have our reputation and our pride at stake here.
Sure.
And they want to pay scale.
Yeah.
All right. So what Ron did, I believe, is he just said, okay, you can hire me for your CD recording. I get X dollars per tune.
Okay.
And so if you want me on your recording, if you can only afford one tune, I'll come in and play one tune and leave.
Right.
Or I'll do the whole thing.
Yeah.
No matter, I'll do as little or as much as you want.
Sure. But it's all a carte. It's and
it was really a solution to that problem of not being locked into that other model where really the musicians were losing out.
Interesting.
Not to mention the fact that the cost of production went down by over 50% when CDs came out.
Sure.
You know as well as I do. I mean, you can get CDs made for $1 each.
Right. Vinyl pressings are a lot more expensive.
Yeah.
Like there's much.
So here's the scenario where the record companies are increasing their profit margin by 60 or 70%. And they're not changing the paradigm for the performers one iota.
Sure.
So that's when I noticed a real change in this whole idea of bands. And then, of course, hotels airlines, all of those costs were going up, but somehow the substructure, the payment structure
I know.
wasn't changing. So, I get calls now for jobs that paid me, say, $100 in 1982.
Right.
And in 2021, they pay $100.
Yeah.
And I don't know how much the cost of living has gone up.
I mean, I think the standard is 3% a year. So if you take 82 is the year I was born. So that's 39 years ago. 39 times 3% is what percentage? You know what I mean?
100 and something.
Yeah. So that means $100 gig in relation should pay $1,000.
Absolutely.
If you're looking at it that way. And it's actually post-pandemic, and during the pandemic, I decided I'm not doing it. Unless it's like cats I really want to play with or dudes I haven't seen in a while. No, because that means I'm agreeing that my playing doesn't have any more value than it did 20 years ago.
Well, and also, another way of looking at it, I mean, again, I'm in total agreement, but, again, because I was someone who prepared.
Sure.
I was someone who looked for niches.
Yeah.
Who developed skill sets and added to my hat rack.
Yeah.
Right. So at this stage, if someone offers me a gig for $100, the only question is the music and or the people, is that inviting to me? Will I have fun?
Yeah.
Because
there has to be other value in it, because the $100 doesn't have value.
No. When they pay me $100 now, and they kind of hand me this $100 bill kind of apologetically, I tell them, listen, don't worry about it, because for me, this is just fishing tackle money.
Yeah, right.
That's great. I had a great time, played some great music with people that I love playing with. I should be paying them.
Yeah.
So, but I owe that to kind of building my hardware store, getting back to that analogy, And, but I totally agree with you in that, that's something else that I think we have to be aware of, is that there's a certain kind of, self-marketing that we have to be aware of. I did an experiment years ago. It was early in my career, and I was probably working every night for like $50.
Yeah.
That was whatever the going rate was in whatever zone I was in.
Yeah.
Like fellow unknowns. Yeah. Right, at like the corner bar, those gigs.
Sure.
Okay. So great. I'm getting a lot of experience playing with good people, just like entry level. Right.
Yeah. Great place to cut your chops, like on the gig training.
So year after year goes by. And at some point I thought, man, this is kind of moving sideways. I'm not, So I arbitrarily, on January 1st of a certain year, I just said, okay, unless they're paying me X dollars, I'm not leaving the house.
Yeah.
And if they call and invite me to play a gig, I'll tell them that I'll do it for whatever my price is.
Yeah.
Okay. I did that for a year as an experiment. Here was the result. I worked half as many gigs and I made the same amount of money. And the gigs that I was doing were in better venues.
Sure.
With better people.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, the only time people saw me play in public in New York was at the Village Vanguard.
Right. You increased your value just by setting boundaries.
And it was an illusion, man. It was marketing. Because my playing in that year, I didn't just blossom into like the next Buster Williams,
But how did it change your playing? Because if you're not playing gigs as often, things loosen up and you don't get into these. I mean, I remember when I was playing a lot, like anywhere between 5 to 9 nights a week.
Yeah.
The weekends I was pulling like doubles and triples. It was in what, like for my ego, it was amazing.
Of course.
For my playing, it was really, really static, and I wasn't bringing new things to the bass or to the music every night. And so it wasn't until I started playing less that I felt the music I was showing up with was I was more emotionally committed to, and it was fresher.
You're absolutely right. That is a byproduct. The other thing to think about is because you're suddenly in this other echelon, you're playing with better players, which is raising your level of ability.
Sure.
You know, the goal is to play with the best cats on the planet.
Yeah.
That's what raises your level quicker than anything.
Yeah.
You know, so there's a lot of benefits to that. But really, that was just a perceptual thing. I just kind of thought, how, you know, look, I like to think at that point, I thought I've worked pretty hard. You know, I have some ability.
Mm-hmm.
And how do I want people to think about me?
Sure.
Well, do I want them to think, well, he's the best guy we can get for $40?
Right.
Or is he unattainable for my gigs? And then I started getting calls the next year from some of those same people, and they would say, I finally got a gig that I can afford you for.
Yeah.
And so what happened was those former employers also started to get to another level of business.
Sure.
And they didn't forget about me.
Yeah.
They just realized, hey, now I have a gig that pays this, and Coolman, he's available if I can pay him that.
Right.
So, you know, and I'm not talking about astronomical figures. I didn't have the gravitas to charge the moon.
Yeah.
But I just thought, okay, this is a fair wage.
Yeah.
For who I am and what I do and what I've prepared for. It's like, this is totally fair.
Yeah.
And I was giving myself a raise to keep up with inflation. It was that simple.
Sure.
Like anybody else, you know, working people, that's in their contract.
Yeah.
Every year they get a 3 or 4% raise to account for the cost of living.
Right.
And maybe a little bigger raise for merit.
Yeah.
But that's how it works in most of the world.
Yeah.
Except in
us.
music.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, you know. So, so anyway, and then I found too that by diversifying, I actually had a guy come up to me at a club in Minneapolis one night, and he wanted me to sign one of the books I wrote.
Mm-hmm. I do want to talk about those actually. Those are
so I'm signing it. And he goes, you know something? He says, I'm glad I came tonight. He says, because I didn't even realize that you played the bass. And I'm thinking,
to my knowledge, you have two books, both ridiculously focused. One is called The Bass Tradition. The other, okay.
I guess this guy thought I was Ted Clancy or something, you know, like, you know, or whatever. But yeah. So, or Tom Clancy, I guess it is. But,
did he figure you as just a
I don't know, like maybe
or
some academic
historian?
or I don't know what.
Yeah.
But anyway, the point of it was through the book, this individual found out that I'm a bass player.
Okay.
And so next time I was in Minneapolis, he came and he brought some friends, but I'd already signed his books. He came because he knew I played the bass. Okay. Or whatever.
Yeah. Well, and he felt that he had some connection with you, that he had.
Yeah. So, you know, and all of these little hats, they all kind of, they kind of bleed over the borders.
Yeah. I agree.
So if you're writing books or if you're playing electric and acoustic bass, or if you're teaching, or if you're giving clinics, or you're selling T-shirts with your logo, I don't know what. Yeah. But I mean, all this stuff kind of like has a funny way of cross-pollinating. Yeah. And this helps that. Right. You know, and then that helps this, and then blah, blah, blah. So, you know, I think the days for most of us of just being the bass player, I'm not so sure that's sustainable except for a very few people. In a very, in specific niches, you know, if that's true too. Doing like maybe just really relevant pop touring, you know, something like that. Okay, cool. But I mean, if that's the niche and you really dig into that and invest into that,
it can work for you. And I think that's one of the biggest takeaways I've had to learn, is just be purposeful with where you put your time, because each niche will take time and effort. And that's a whole network, and that's a hang that you have to make. Those are contacts you have to do, and you got to get into that scene.
Yeah.
The idea of when I was coming up, it's like, well, if I could do everything pretty cool, then I'll be working all the time.
Right.
What happens is you're not really known for anything.
That's correct.
You're just like the bottom feeder in playing soul music, and then you're like maybe the last call for a jazz gig, and you're this. But if the dudes that are really like, I'm the jazz guy, then just really you got to pick a lane.
Yeah, they're all in.
Yeah, and
and they can be very successful.
Yeah,
my good friend Peter Washington.
Oh sure,
is a guy who I would call him hands down.
Yeah,
for those styles of music that he's devoted himself to.
Mm-hmm.
And in a heartbeat, I would call this guy. He's the first guy I would think of. So, but he's all in, and he said, "This is who I am.
Yeah,
this is what I do, and here we go."
Yeah, and then within that, there's its own rules of diversification. And
that's true too. That's true too. But it's because Peter has positioned himself that way, and because he's such a prolific player, a beautiful player, he occupies a lot of real estate in a town where there's not a lot of real estate.
Yeah.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
So he picked the zone, and he took that zone.
Yeah.
And other guys are in the zone, but he's still he's going to be called first.
Right.
And I think he should be,
yeah.
So God bless him, but I think there's definitely a lesson there. It's not that, he's not capable of doing other things. He just chose not to play in a top 40 band, for example.
Right.
And yet the guys that are in there work all the time.
Yeah.
They've got summer homes in Tahiti and stuff. So good.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, that beats the hell out of working on Wall Street.
Sure.
So God bless them. I think, I don't really categorize or evaluate or any of that stuff. And I don't think some guy that's like a full-time top 40 electric bass player is somehow beneath what other guys do.
Sure.
No, he's an expert.
Yeah.
He's a professional musician who is at the top of his game.
Yeah.
And I take my hat off to that guy.
Sure.
So that's where that's at.
Yeah. And I like hearing that. I like hearing you say that from all the jazz giants you've played with, which is jazz being a very academic music, still honoring, the different areas and honoring the fact that it's a big world and there's room for everybody. And if you make it to the top of whatever your lane is, cool. Job well done.
If you hear Victor Wooten and you can't dig that, then you might as well just get 6 feet under right now.
Right.
Because this guy is saying something.
Yeah.
And so many guys. In fact, that really turned me on early in my career. I was playing out in Los Angeles.
Okay.
And I had a couple nights off. I'll never forget this. And I wasn't so into that music at the time, frankly. I was young. I was a purist.
Yeah.
Oh man, if it ain't bebop, fuck it. Sorry, pardon my language.
No.
But the thing is, so I purposely went, and I heard a band. It was Lee Ritenour,
okay,
Tom Scott, Alex Acuna, and
Bunny Burrell,
Abraham
maybe?
Laboriel.
Okay,
Abe Laboriel. Okay, so and I even went there with an attitude.
Yeah. That, by the way, are like the most LA of the LA guys. Like,
right. And first of all, I'm from New York, you punk, that kind of just arrogant, self-centered bullshit.
Right. New York is where the real shit happens. Like,
right, exactly. Yeah. So I'm sitting there like this, right? And they start playing. And man, within 1 minute, I was like this and my jaw was on the ground. And another minute, and I was so into it.
Yeah.
It was so perfect.
Right.
These guys just played so great. They were instrumental masters. And when I heard Abe Laboriel,
Yeah.
just like his sound, I was on the floor.
Yeah. And that fire and that energy, like,
yeah. And then,
so much.
then the inventiveness.
Yeah.
And then also here I realized I'm listening to a guy that can play anything, right?
Yeah.
But on a certain tune, he's just playing boom, 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 boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom, for like 5 minutes. And I thought, well, man, he can do a lot more than that.
Yeah.
But then I thought, wait a minute, that is the thing.
Yeah.
That is the thing, and I really dug it,
Yeah.
and I didn't even have the nerve afterward to go up and like introduce myself or say hello, because I was so ashamed of where my head was when I walked in the joint.
Yeah.
And I thought if I went up and told him I would be like
felt like
or something.
Yeah, like you'd be a hypocrite or something. Yeah.
So I just thought, you know what? Lick your wounds, Coolman, and leave this place and learn something from this.
Sure.
And man, that was like one of the great learning experiences. And then I started listening to all kinds of bass players in all kinds of genres, including non-Western genre.
Yeah.
And just, and let's face it, man, good bass playing is just good bass playing.
Yeah.
And good musicianship and professionalism is to be admired.
Sure.
So like, I don't care who it is. When I hear a guy taking care of it, I can go into Club X in Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah.
And hear some guy playing Tex-Mex stuff.
Yeah.
But just playing the hell out of it.
Yeah.
And then I can just go up to him afterward with all sincerity, say, man, right on.
Yeah. You're
kicking ass, and I really enjoyed your playing, and keep doing what you're doing. And then they'll say, well, are you a bass player? And I'll say, well, yeah. Who are you, Oh my God, and I've been a fan of yours. So really it's like, if you're open.
Sure.
And you can, if nothing else, if that wasn't my favorite music of my life, just to appreciate the skill level of a comrade, makes me want to practice.
Mm-hmm.
Makes me I want to get home and get my bass and try to get better at being a professional bass player.
Sure.
Period.
Yeah. And
so that's what I've learned from that. So it's really kind of funny because I did it in the opposite. You're supposed to be all open-minded when you're 20 and all closed-minded when you're 65 or whatever. I did it the other way around.
To go back to the books you wrote, The Bass Tradition actually was one of my favorite books. I used to have it. I love that book, and actually was probably a bigger inspiration than I knew. The other half of what I do here with the Bass Shed is transcriptions, and it's the whole concept is learning from the legends. Everything you need to know has probably already been recorded. So go find it. I do a lot of transcriptions, and everything that was in the Bass Tradition, it's basically that through videos now. So there's that aspect of the books. It's kind of like this street education of just learning from records. But then the other one, the bottom line, is a much more academic, cerebral approach. And I'm guessing I can kind of piece together where that comes from your personal formal education, and then the education you've gotten on the gig from all these masters. Coming from both sides of the education, the real world and the classroom, have you found that the classroom fills in gaps that the gig didn't teach you, and the gig fills in gaps that the classroom didn't teach you?
Wow. Well,
yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot.
But I wouldn't say that one place or the other sort of didn't teach something, but that sometimes certain concepts or ideas resonate better in certain environments.
Yeah.
So, for example, I could hear Charlie Hayden play and not have a clue as to what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't mean that I didn't learn something from it.
Sure.
Yeah. And, same thing, like maybe somebody in a classroom was able to say, well, this is what we think Charlie Haden is doing. And maybe if I could put the two together, somehow I could have a better understanding.
Yeah.
So, first of all, there certainly is no substitute for hearing live music.
Right.
No matter what you do or do not know about it. It's, and the learning you get from that is very, very hard to categorize. The classroom, of course, has evolved with, I think, the disappearance of what we used to call 52nd Street, or in other words, street learning.
Sure. Learning
on the bandstand. And that had to do with, just you have to know about jazz history and how this all evolved. But I think that the ideal player today is one who's both intuitive and also intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I frankly, I don't know many guys that can really play jazz well. If they can't, they're not dummies.
Right.
Now, I know some guys who make very bad choices. But as far as playing music is concerned, they're not dumb.
Yeah.
Because they can play this stuff. The bass tradition book, the transcriptions, of course, it was something that I knew that I needed to transcribe to acquire a vocabulary, basically.
Uh-huh.
And the funny thing about that book is, when I decided to write it, actually, I didn't decide to write it. I was on the road like 40 or more weeks a year at one point.
Oh, wow.
And I was struck by how much time was wasted in the air. 17-hour flight to Sydney.
Yeah.
Like, that's a lot of time to not do anything.
Right. Like, it's a straight up day.
Yeah. Or, whatever, flight delays.
Yeah.
Or day off in like Mansfield, Ohio.
Right.
What good is that, So they came out with that thing, that cassette recorder called the Walkman.
Mm-hmm.
Revolutionary. So a portable cassette recorder that even had A-B repeat on it. Now, I'm blessed to have relative pitch.
Okay.
So I can relate to certain pitches and then know what's happening, pitch wise. So I just took this Walkman with me on the road, and during flights or during layovers in hotels or layovers at airports or any other, totally dead time, I would start transcribing a solo.
Okay. I
took cassettes with me of like solos of all these different guys and after a while I had a bunch of them transcribed, and I was giving a workshop somewhere and I mentioned the name Oscar Pettiford.
Mm-hmm.
And this young boy in the back of the room raised his hand. He says, Oscar Pettiford is my mailman's name. And I thought, now this kid has never heard of the real Oscar Pettiford, and he thinks it's his mailman.
Right. Also, kind of impressive that he knows his mailman's name.
In a way, yes.
That's. Yeah. I'm blown away. A couple reasons, all within just the setup of this story already. Yeah. That he doesn't know the bass player, but he's at a bass workshop, and he knows his mailman's full name.
There you go. So, but I thought, immediately when I heard that, I thought something's wrong with this. So I thought, maybe if I publish these transcriptions, I can enlighten people who may not be enlightened yet.
Yeah.
Because I knew inherently that we had to assemble an initial vocabulary from the masters.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I went about it. And of course, the painful thing with, making a list of people is leaving people off the list. You could go on and on. I could have written 29 volumes of the bass tradition. So you
brought up George Duvivier earlier, and I think he is one of the there's a vinyl right here, like on the record player of Sonny Stitt, and it's George on there, and George is one of my favorites that never really got some of the recognition of Pettiford, in that really bass legend thing, but he's right there.
I agree. Yeah, there's so many, So, so I assembled that, and in those days, we were a little unclear about things like copyright law. It was a lot of vagary in that area. So I just met each player or sent him a letter explaining what I was doing and asked them to sign a release. Mm-hmm. I figured if I got their permission, then it would be okay.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but back in the day, that's kind of how we did it. Coming at the other angle, like the bass, what did I call it? The bottom line book.
Yeah.
That came as a result of some teaching experience I had. And by that time in my career, I had come to understand that what we really have to master, regardless of idiom, is what I call just the grits and gravy of the music. Right. I mean, and I was concerned that there were a lot of players, a lot of students I had that could play at it, but they didn't really do it.
Okay.
Their bass lines might have even been, somehow correct notes, but didn't make any sense anyway. Mm-hmm. Or lines where you couldn't differentiate between sounds.
Right.
So if it was a minor chord going to a dominant chord, you couldn't hear that harmonic motion.
Sure.
So I figured that I would write a book that focused on the basics. Mm-hmm. And I guess I'll explain it this way. I had the good fortune to play for many, many years in a quartet led by James Moody.
Yeah.
And he's one of the preeminent soloists of his era.
Sure.
And one time, he was a habitual practicer. This guy practiced all the time.
Yeah.
And one time, after I got to know him and was around him for years, I said, "Hey, Moody," I said, "Man, what on earth do you practice now? I mean, you've played the entire history of jazz, like in one night, what do you practice?" And he said, and he picked up his tenor, and he played a C major scale up one octave and back down, and then he said, "and variations therein," and that was just heavy. Because let's think about it, man. There's 12 notes and there's 12 keys.
Right.
Until further notice.
Right.
Okay. So that book, I thought, well, I'll write it in such a way that a beginner could get with it. Mm-hmm. But I had no illusions that it could help players at more advanced levels, if nothing else, to remind them of who we are.
Sure.
And what we do.
Yeah.
At one time, I like telling stories on myself where I think other guys would be embarrassed to admit some of the things I admit.
Okay.
But the reason I offer them freely is because I want people to know, like, if they think that I've achieved something, whatever they're going through, I've gone through it.
Right. You're identifying with the struggle we have all encountered.
Absolutely. Yeah, we all have those dark days. We all get kicked on our ass. We all want to give up at some point.
Sure.
It happens.
Yeah.
So I remember years ago, I was in a group with, I love him too. He's out in L.A., Terry Gibbs.
Oh, yeah.
And Buddy DeFranco had a group. So in that tradition and with the music, the tunes we were playing and stuff, there really wasn't, the bass solo wasn't really a thing very much. So we were in Chicago and we're going to play a week and we're going to record live on the weekend.
Okay.
So a rehearsal, doing all this stuff. After rehearsal, I said, "Hey, Terry," I said, on the weekend when we're recording, I said, "You think I could have a couple solos?"
Yeah.
He says, "Why do you want a solo?" And I said, "Well, I'm young and I have not on too many records yet. And I'd like for people to get to know a little bit about what I do and how I sound and stuff.
Yeah.
He says, so you want to get famous? I said, well, I don't know. I don't know about famous, but maybe, better known, maybe.
Yeah, yeah.
He says, you'll get famous and you'll get better known by making me sound good. And he said, if you want a solo, he said, get your own band. And,
I kind of agree with it. Yeah.
And I felt terrible.
Yeah.
But I went back to my hotel room and thought it through. And I called him up and I said, Terry, about what we talked about. I said, I want to apologize because I said, I think, I was kind of naive and a little bit selfish. And I said, I realize what you were saying. I know you said it a certain way, but I said, I think I understand what you meant.
Yeah.
And I said, I'm here to be the bass player.
Sure. And
to be supportive of the music. And I said, I get it. And I said, thank you for sharing that. I said, I'm a big boy now. And if you have things, you don't have to sugarcoat them for me.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Okay.
So dig this. Friday night, first set, 3 bass solos. So in other words, he wanted me to really understand how this stuff works.
Yeah. Put it in context.
He didn't have any opposition to having a bass play a solo. It was just like first things first.
Right.
So I really like it when bass players really can really embrace that which we are.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm not even so sure that when a bass player plays a solo that anybody cares about it anyway.
No.
So it's like, and now that's not to say that I want to be the next best bass soloist in the planet. Sure. We practice all of that.
Yeah.
And we want to improve. And I think I've improved over the years, but that's not why I got hired.
Mm-hmm.
Not for my solos.
Sure.
So that's kind of where the bottom line book was kind of like for beginners, hopefully a good organized system to kind of get that together. For more advanced players, if nothing else, a reminder of who we are.
Yeah, and I think it's always necessary to never lose track of that. And I think the more time I've spent with doing the transcriptions and digging into all these guys, it's so important. Like you look at how much thought is, if I go with, I did transcribe the Ron Carter solo off of the album Third Plane, where they play Stella.
I liked that record
in 6. And I love Ron's bass line on that because almost every way that you can play 3, he covers it in 3 choruses before his solo. Like He floats, he walks, he does sets up these. I mean, it's very Ron. It's very all the genius of Ron is in this bass line.
Right.
And just so much detail and attention to detail in his bass line construction. Like really, you're not just dumping out some quarter notes until you can solo. Like this is your job. This is your job. And Ron does that better than anybody,
He plays on purpose.
Yeah.
There's nothing ambiguous about any note he chooses to play.
No.
So
nothing slipped through the cracks with Ron.
But just imagine, like you can devote your whole life and career just to getting that together,
Yeah.
So, and I kind of chuckle, I listen to young bass players playing and they're playing with their contemporaries. Mm-hmm. And now they're exploring rhythmic things and they're exploring what we used to call odd meters, right?
Sure.
But you know what? It's interesting to hear all this music. I mean, some of it's quite interesting. But the role of the bass hasn't changed.
Right.
So you got some piece that's in, 11/8.
Yeah.
And the bass player is still saying boo, boo, doo, ba, boo, boo, da, boo, be, boo, ba, doo, ba, da, ba, da, boo, be, whatever it might be. That role hasn't changed a hell of a lot.
No.
Even though the music is quite different in nature. But ultimately, I was in elementary school, I was pretty good at math,
Okay.
So like 11/8, right? Oh, it's the new thing. It's new, right?
Yeah.
Well, let's see. 4 plus 3 is 7.
right.
Plus 4 is 11. Oh, how about that?
Yeah.
So odd meters are in 4 and 3, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I think it's was written in a John Goldsby book. I think he just calls it what was the book? The Jazz book or the Jazz bass book or something. There's a chapter on 2s and 3s. It's all just 2s and 3s.
Exactly.
I play with a guitar player regularly who loves to play in 15. Good. So it's a bar of 4/4 and a bar of 7/8. And that's how he groups it. And like, okay, it's all just 2s and 3s. Like it's never difficult. It's just an accent, you know?
Well, that's the point. Like when I hear anything in a so-called odd meter, I just want to know where is the pulse.
Right.
So it might be 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, whatever it is. But there's always seems to be, well, in good odd meter playing.
Sure.
Dig this. It should swing.
Yeah.
It should have a groove.
Uh-huh.
So, swing isn't confined to 4/4.
Right.
So if somebody writes something that has a good feeling, I couldn't care less what meter it's in.
Sure.
But if they write in a so-called odd meter for the sake of being hip and it doesn't feel good, I got no time for that.
Yeah. There's I love street art. And so I live in Venice, California, and there's a lot of street art around me.
Of course.
And there's a mural just down the street of Charlie Chaplin's face, and it says smile right by it. And in the picture, he's not smiling. And I thought that was really ironic. So I went home and I took the tune, Smile, and I kind of wrote this dark arrangement of it to reflect the street art thing. Yeah. And the bass line that came out, it's just an ostinato, and it just ended up being in 13. And I wasn't trying to write it in 13.
Right.
That was just the idea. And now I can't kind of hear it another way. Like it's just like I hear it in 13 and the melody works this way. And it's fun.
Yeah.
To make that stuff groove. And a guy I like to check in with for that is Sting. Sting always writes an odd meter that you never think it's odd meter until you realize it's odd meter.
Well, that's because it feels good.
Absolutely, and that's
and if it does, then that what did they asked Ellington, Duke Ellington? They said, "What kind of music do you like?"
Oh yeah.
And he said, "Well, there's good music and bad music," and he said, "I prefer good music."
Yeah, that's
so
it,
really,
man.
We do. I mean, I'm lucky to have lived long enough to have somehow acquired a more broad-minded view of music than I certainly did not have it when I was very young.
Yeah.
I was a real, snob, basically.
Yeah, sure.
But you know what? It's funny. Like by being a little bit more open in my older age, I've actually become better even at playing the music that I was originally snobbish about.
Right.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So, it's just about becoming a better player and,
sure.
and looking at obstacles as challenges. I had a mentor in my academic life and he faced a lot of genuine challenges in his life, health challenges and other things. And he would always say, this should be an interesting adventure.
Yeah. He was embracing it.
You see, and that for me now, that's where it's at. It's like if something seems really strange to me, then it suggests to me that I've got a problem, not the music.
Yeah,
and then I'll kind of check it out that way, and I'll take what I can from it.
Yeah.
You know, and steal from the best.
Yeah, that's it, man. That's it. That's exactly it. Dude, thanks so much for doing this. I appreciate it.
This is a real pleasure, man. I don't, of course it's been kind of a pandemic thing, but when's the last time I got to hang out on the corner and talk bass with somebody?
I know. It's been fun.
So I think it's a great service that your podcast is providing because.
Oh, thank you. Likewise. And let's talk about yours. I mean, it's in my notes here. You're, as of today, which is July 6th, you're 15 episodes deep.
Right.
And you talk about your experience and your, and even very similarly to the stories you've told right here. It's exposing the real nature of your time in the jazz scene. It's taking a look behind the curtain of your career and how you speak with other musicians. And I love that because I'm always interested in that as well. And talking to different players, maybe classical people or pop people, whatever, and hearing what the world is and what it's not,
Right.
because I'm not, my friend Derek, who was on the road with Gwen Stefani, like I'm never going to be on that gig, but he gets to tell me about what that gig is really like now.
That's so cool. Yeah. Well, I started the podcast. I it's kind of hard to come up with a title for these things, but I
like what you did. Yeah.
I call it the Cool Toddcast.
Yeah.
Play on words. But, I started it really just for my own amusement.
Yeah.
But I thought, well, why should I have a podcast, or why would anybody care about a podcast? But I just realized, I thought, well, I've been in the music business about 45 years, I guess. Mm-hmm. Maybe longer. I don't know. And I thought, well, I've had a certain experience.
Yeah.
And I just thought, if I can share that experience with others, there may be analogies to their reality.
Yeah.
Because even though the music business has changed radically,
sure,
since the time that the business side, the act of being a professional musician and the things that we think about, the things that we go through,
right,
our triumphs, our failures, and everything in between,
insecurities and all egos, and all that stuff. Yeah,
it's definitely part of any endeavoring professional musician's path.
Yeah,
is going to be littered with similar experiences, even though the business is so different. The process of getting into music as a way of life, I think that there's a certain universality that if somehow I could hear Louis Armstrong's story, I think there'd be a lot of similarities. So to whatever extent my so-called experience can be helpful to someone else, or just resonate on some level, or, like you say, give the non-musician or the total novice, just pull that curtain a little bit.
Dude, thanks so much, Todd.
Thank you so much. This is a lot of fun.
All right, that was my talk with Todd Coolman. What I love about Todd Coolman is how diverse his career is, with releasing records, with the writing of the books, with all the teaching he does. Obviously, with doing the podcast is something something I'm cool with because I'm doing one. But I like how he's diversified his career with all these different things. And I highly recommend his podcast. You can get there by searching for The Cool Toddcast, or you can get there by thebasshed.com/podcast/Todd Coolman, where I will have links up to his podcast, his website, and all the other things that Todd is up to, his records, Spotify page. So yeah, definitely check him out. If you've not gotten with the books, The Bass Tradition and The Bottom Line, I highly suggest both of those. I highly suggest listening to his albums. If you're enjoying this podcast, please subscribe on whatever platform you are listening to it on. You can rate it, leave a comment. You can always email me at ryan@thebasshed.com. And that's about all I got for this one, folks. I will catch you on the next one in a minute.